Dorothy, Eunice, Grant, Eaddy. That's a full name, isn't it? I married an Eaddy.
She was a wealthy woman that lived in Columbia.
Okay.
She adopted, you may have heard from Sister, I don't know.
What was her?
She adopted Jackie.
Okay.
Jackie Stackhouse. And Jackie used to come down here. And she wore fancy, nice clothes. And Sister got some of them, and we got some of them, because Miss Eunice would bring some of them with her when she'd come, and she'd give it out to the poor. Well, not as wealthy as she was. And Mother actually used her house in Columbia. She let Mother use it in the summertime, because Mother went to
Summer
school a lot to finish her degree.
I was born right down here in this house is where I was born and raised, and finished Myrtle Beach High School and went to Winthrop College. And after I finished Winthrop, I majored in biology. I went to the medical university and took medical technology. And then I had to take an exam to be a medical technologist. And after I finished that and passed it, I got a job with Stehek in Florence. Their district, they had 3 or 4 district labs, and I got a job in Florence at one of their district labs, and ran all kind of tests.
She did the milk test.
I checked the milk, and I checked the municipal water, and they had sanitarians that would go out and collect all this stuff and bring it into the lab. Sometime I'd be there until 10 or 11 o'clock at night. Warren built this house before we retired, really. He worked in Darlington. He worked for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
Very big on education. You know, my mother started teaching right out of high school. She was the...
Mother and Daddy were both school teachers.
She wasn't the valedictorian. She was, what's next? The salutatorian. She was in high school. There wasn't a high school around here when Mother was born. She went to Georgetown.
And she went on a ship.
She went on a boat. They had a mail. They carried the mail from Waukawatchis to Georgetown, and Mother's uncle did that. And so when she wanted to come home, she rode on the mail boat. They didn't have money. They were rather poor. They lived on McDowell Shortcut, and that was one reason she married Daddy, because Daddy was so well educated, even though he was 30 years older than Mother. But she really wanted an education, so she boarded on a street in Georgetown. I don't remember which street it was. I used to know the house. She used to show it to us every time we went down there. And
was it Prince Street?
I'm thinking it may have been. She boarded with the family. She had an uncle that had money, and he paid for her to stay there. When she would come home, she'd ride on the mail boat. But you know, she actually
both of our parents were educating. They loved to be educated. They loved for you to be educated.
Mother got her degree from the university the same year my husband finished dental school in the University of Louisville.
That was hard for her with
she did a lot
4
of
or 5 children to go to school all summer.
Summer schools, and the other part was where she, what do you call that? She wrote the lessons up and sent them in. Can't think what you call it right now. But that's how she got her education. Daddy was well educated. He left to go to Walford. They used to have what they call fitting school, and I think that they didn't have a high school around here, so I reckon they taught them, that fitted them for college, and then they went to the college, and he was up there for 4 years. And Daddy,
Fitting school was 2 years, wasn't it?
yeah, so he was up there for 6 years. And he read Greek, he read Latin, he read German. He had all those kind of books. And he never took French, but when Dorothy and I were in high school, we both took French, and we'd be sitting there at night trying to translate some of those words, and he'd just tell us right off the bat what it was. Well, I understand if you know Latin, you can do that. My mother was Thelma Lee Grant. Thelma Lee, she married Grant. This is funny how I always remembered who won the war. Daddy was John Frederick Grant, and he won her, so. But when Daddy finished Walford, who was it came down here to interview him, and they begged him to go back and take a chair in the English department.
Dr. Snyder.
Yeah, and Daddy said, no, I've been up there for 6 years, and that's enough. Like I said, he was spoiled. He was one child. He said, I'm going back and live on the water and fish. And that is exactly what he did.
Except he was principal at school.
He did teach. He was principal of several schools and superintendent in, I think, Conway or Murrell Beach or somewhere. This was before we were born, of course. Okay. And, but he was determined to stay here and fish, and I can remember in high school, we'd go down, or in elementary school, we'd go down, he would go out and fish all night and come in early in the morning, right before daybreak, and we'd go down there, and he would have, it was a wooden boat, he'd have this boat full of fish, and they'd be frozen. But today, it doesn't get that cold, really. And he'd have to wait until they thawed out, because he sold a lot of them when he would come in. All right, my name is Anna Lee Grant Myers. Talk about hers is long, mine's long too. I am older than she is. I was born in 1930.
And I was born in 31, so she's a lot older.
Oh, well, I went to school in Myrtle Beach, started in the 1st grade, and I graduated from Myrtle Beach in 1947 and went to Winthrop too. But I'll tell you this little story. We had, back in those days, we had a cow, and Mother or Edward would milk the cow, and I wanted to take piano lessons, and we couldn't afford it, so this woman that lived across the street from the school in Myrtle Beach taught piano lessons, so she said she would teach me if we'd bring her 2 quarts of milk every week. So they'd get up and milk the cow, and I'd take 2 quarts of milk on the bus. And when I got there, I'd take them over to her house. And I think I took the lessons during recess. I did not become a very good pianist. I will tell you that.
She played for church, for
well,
Sunday school.
In the little church that we went to, the little chapel, which is a picture of it right up here, I would get there, and if there was nobody else there to play, I had to play the piano, and that was a scary time for me because I didn't really like to do that. I didn't play that well. And everybody laughed and said, I play the same one every time. Jesus loves me or something like that, I don't remember. And I did. Not the same one. I did know about 2, maybe, or 3.
Yeah, you did all right.
I guess it was better than nothing. But anyway, when I finished high school, I went to Winthrop, and I majored in math. Because I love math, and I really started liking that when I was in high school. it was kind of hard for us to get money to go to college, even though it wasn't near as expensive as it is now. So in the summer, Dorothy and I spent a lot of time out in the creek. We practically lived in the creek. Because first of all, we did not have, we didn't have air conditioning, and it was hot. And if it was high tide, we got a good breeze, it was fine. But we didn't, it wasn't always like that. So we would go out in the creek and catch, we could catch a bushel of crabs in about 30 minutes. Back then, you can't do it now. We would just stand out there on the oyster rocks, and at low tide, the crabs would come up to feed. And we'd just take a dip net and just dip them up. We'd have a bucket full of them, I mean a bushel basket full of them. And we'd bring them back and cook them.
Pick out the meat and sell it.
And we sold it to Jimmy Easton's store that was right down the road.
It's burned down too.
Of course, I think, let's see, we got about, what, 20 cents? Helen and Edward were the other two. There were 4 of us. Edward was older. He was the oldest one. He was 2 years older than I. He was the age of Sister Peterkin. Helen did not go to Myrtle Beach School. At the time, they had the school building out here, and Daddy was teaching out there. And Helen went to school there, and Daddy taught her. She never did like that. She didn't like her daddy teaching. But anyway.
He was pretty strict, don't I?
Well, I'm sure he was, but when she finished here, she went to Georgetown because they passed this law, I think, that if you lived in Georgetown County, you had to go to school in Georgetown. We went to Myrtle Beach because at that time, I don't think this school was down here. Helen finished Georgetown one year, and then she went to Limestone. She didn't want to go to Winthrop where we went. She went to do something different. Well, another one is Daddy fished, and we ate out of the creek, but he was a good farmer. I mean, he really had a good farm every year. And, you know, all the vegetables, and we had fruit trees, we had pear trees, we had apple trees, we had grapevines, and still have some of that out there now. But we own this property across over here where the Creekside, we sold him that property. And out there across the road, he used to grow watermelons and cantaloupe and
peanuts.
The one thing we remember very well is he had 4 peanut rows that went from like Oliver's Lodge down to this other end of of that place, and Dorothy and I were out there hoeing. Now, I don't ever remember Helen doing any of this. I guess she was too young, I don't know. But we would hoe those peanuts in the heat. Oh, it was terrible. And we actually ate a lot of peanuts. When they would get ready, we would pull them and dry them. And we had a peanut grinder where we could grind the peanuts and make peanut butter. And I know when Dorothy and I were out in the creek a lot, we would get so hungry out there. And one thing we actually did was take 2 clams and break them together and eat them raw. I loved clams raw. We learned to love them. But the other thing is we knew we had a lot of peanut butter around, so we'd run up to the house and fix us another sandwich of peanut butter and go back out in the creek. We actually lived out there. But we lived very well, and actually during the Depression of the 30s, we really did not know that there was one because, you know, we had all the food out there and we basically ate, that was our meat. So, I mean, and we did have cows, so we had butter and buttermilk. Oh, that was the best thing. They don't make it like that anymore. A little piece of butter in it. And we had chickens, so we had eggs. Edward actually got a goat one time. I never could figure out why because it didn't do anything.
He wanted the goat, I think. He milked the goat.
Oh, but Helen went to Limestone, and then she got out and she taught. I think she taught in Georgetown for a while.
She did.
I'm not really sure because see, I was 5 years old. I had already finished with the. I went to teach in Manning. I taught there for 2 years. I actually was teaching there the year that Miss America was there, and she was in a study period of me. I taught her sister. She was a beautiful girl. She would be in my study hall now, and all I could do was sit there and look at her. She came down here. She was dating a boy that had a house down here behind the Blue, that restaurant down there. What is it? A Blue Elephant, yeah. Okay. And I know a time or two when I would come home and be walking down there, I would see her dating that boy, but she didn't marry him. She married some movie director in California. She's out there.
What was her name? Marilyn?
Marilyn McKnight.
McKnight.
Yeah. Her sister was June McKnight. I taught June. I didn't teach Marilyn. But when we were growing up, there was a road that went all the way through here that cars went on. Mm-hmm. All the way through here. And that little place right here where there's so much water now, it eventually washed out. But when we were growing up, we always, if we went to the post office, we'd get out here and we'd walk all the way down the front, all the way to the post office, which is over there where that lawyer's office is now. And we finally closed it up because the people all the way down here didn't want cars running out in front of us. I'll tell you another story. One time
there was one person that didn't want the road closed, and that was the Olivers, because they were afraid they'd lose business.
Yeah.
Because they were right on the road. And I can understand that, but anyway, it was closed.
But one time we went out here, and there was this car that drove up out there, and they drove up in our front yard. And I don't know if they were drinking, I don't know what they were doing, but anyway, they didn't know how to get out. And they yelled, said, "How you get out of this place?" And Daddy went out there. He chewed them out pretty good. He said, "You get out of here the way you got in." They got out finally. But that was so long ago. I mean, when that road was out there, I don't really know if I remember the cars going on it. I mean, I do remember us walking to the post office and back, and we would. There was also a grocery store down here. I was thinking it was the Birds. They had not have a grocery store down. We'd stop and get a loaf of bread or something. That was about all we bought from the store. But we mostly did our shopping at Jimmy Easton's. Yeah, I remember we had a screen porch on the front. Daddy had a room by himself, and we had a porch, and Daddy had a bedroom over here, and the screen porch was over here. There was another bedroom behind Daddy's. We have a living. I think there were two double beds in that room. We used to sleep together. I mean, it was kind of. Finally, in the screen porch, we put a bed out there, and some of them could sleep out there too. But and then the kitchen was in the back of the part of the house, and we had a little screen porch on that came off of the kitchen. And another thing that happened during the Depression was we had people. I don't know if they were homeless. Apparently they were. That would be walking down this road out here, and they would come down there to our house, and they were hungry. And Mother always fixed them a plate, whoever it was. And on that screen porch, we had this little, it was like a kid's table, and she'd put the plate out there, and they would sit there and eat it. And they were very thankful, very grateful for it. And they'd go on down the road. We had a number of times that people did that during the 30s. We actually had property, and Daddy planted everything, and we didn't really have to buy anything, but we didn't have a lot of cash around. So when we went to college, I know one time I paid Dorothy's tuition. That was, I think, after I started teaching. She was 2 years behind me in school because she was the first class to finish 12 grades. I was smart. I just went to 11.
Yeah. Had to go to 12.
The funny part is my husband did too, because I'm older than he is, so he's about her age, and he had to go to 12 grades too. I keep telling him how much smarter I was than he was. The Byers is from Marion. They ran a Ford place in Marion. He owned the Ford place, but actually Daddy sold them their property, and they built the house there, and they came down every summer and stayed. And the house next to them is the Martin house, and Daddy sold them that house too. They were from Marion too, I believe. And the next one was the King house, and I think he sold that one. No, he didn't. No, the next one was what was it? Jones.
Jones house.
They were from Marion too, I believe. But I think the Kings, I don't think he sold them that property. The Kings and the Olivers were there. Had been there as long as we had.
You remember Maxine?
I think. Maxine was an only child too. But her mother knitted all the time, and she had some gorgeous clothes, sweaters and things.
And what?
I used to envy her. Her sweaters were so pretty.
Oh, yeah. She did a lot of knitting.
And on this side, there weren't any neighbors, I don't believe. Going down that road, there were no houses.
West,
down
yeah, the
West. The West were there. Well, they were from Marion too, weren't they?
I believe they were.
Yeah. Miss Stevenson was there.
Yeah.
And I don't know where she was from. I don't know, but she was
from somewhere over next Lake City, I thought.
Yeah, I believe she was. She had a house over there. But there were not a lot of houses down that way. Miss Johnson's house was there, had been there as long as ours, I guess. Miss Dow Johnson.
Well, it's not there now, is it?
No, I think they tore it down. They sold that property to somebody else. They built another house there. Yeah, he bought a lot of that property from my daddy too. He sold property to them, and it was part of that plantation. Yeah, I remember the Kimballs really well. Some more people that came down here that had money. They did a good deed with it too. I love Brook Green. Well, I'll tell you one thing about Brook Green. When we were young, we had bicycles, and we'd ride up to Brook Green and take a picnic lunch with us, and we'd spend the day up there. And this was Miss Chandler was working there, and I think Sister
Genevieve would go too.
Yeah, she'd go with us.
Sister.
And we used to do that. That was our entertainment. When Edward was growing up, he had a paper route, and that paper route went from Nancy's restaurant to Garden City Grill. And you know, there was sometimes he didn't want to do it, and you know who had to do it?
Oh, he was sick.
Me. We did have a woman that did the washing, and she had in this big old wash pot, black wash pot, and she would do our washing every
Build
week.
a fire under it, and
had that stick that she jabbed in it to stir it around.
Do you remember what her name was?
And
We called Aunt Nelly. You know, there were aunts back there, Aunt Nelly. One time, Daddy was out there looking for his glasses. he thought they had gone in the washing. He had them on his face. Oh, me, I never will forget that one.
I know it. We looked everywhere for those things, and he was wearing them. Mother said, your glasses are on your head. He got a man from Conway to build this house. He had seen some houses that this fella had built up in Surfside, and he liked his work, and so he saw him and got him to build this house. But Warren came on the weekends and helped him pour the foundation and that sort of thing. He was...
Tell them how you met him.
How I met Warren?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. How did I meet him?
Well, I was teaching at that time and living in Hemingway.
Oh, yeah.
And somebody told me that I ought to bring Warren down here and let him meet you. So I thought, well, that might be a good idea. So I brought him down here, and she was working in a restaurant. She was working for
Jimmy East and Dot.
No, weren't you working for the Hoskins?
I might have been for the Hoskins.
I believe Hoskins had a restaurant down there. She was related to Jimmy Easton, I believe, wasn't she?
She was Jimmy Easton's
sister. That's where she was working, and Warren went in there, and Dorothy ignored him. And he felt bad. He was ready to go back to Hemingway.
He left.
Well, did he come back?
He did, because you went out and talked to him.
He didn't actually leave. He did. Yeah, I went out and talked to him, and he finally went in, and
yeah, and I dated him that night. We've all worked in a restaurant.
Yeah, I don't remember. It was one up that way too. It may have been Hoskins. I see if she was here, she could tell you, but I don't remember. But Bill and I eloped when we got ready to get married. We were both 25 years old, and I was teaching, and he had just gotten out of service, and he wanted to be a dentist. So he said, "Would you help me get through dental school?" So I said, "Yeah." So we eloped. We went to Atlanta and got married, but we stopped to drink a cup of coffee out there, and Helen waited on us, and she said, she didn't like that. She said, "Can I go with you?" I said, "No, you can't go with us." I said, "When you go home, tell Mother that we have gone to get married." And of course, that ended up to be the same day that Dot and Bill McHouston got married, my first cousin in Greensboro. And I called Mother and when we were in Atlanta and told her we were married, and she laughed and she said, "Well, Dot just came by and said they got married in Conway." But I went teaching first in Manning, and I taught there for 2 years, and then I went to out of Hemingway, it was in Georgetown County, to Pleasant Hill. Taught there for 2 years, and that's when I met Bill. Now, and he was a blind date too. He was. I was teaching with a girl in Hemingway, and she knew Bill and introduced me to him. And so that's when we took off and left and went to Atlanta. But I did teach, and I did help him get through school. He went to the Citadel and did his pre-dent, and I taught in North Charleston when he was at the Citadel. And then we moved to New Albany. Louisville was right across the river. And we looked like the goat man moving. We got a trailer, you wouldn't believe it. With all our junk, we took it to Louisville. And the day we got there, he got pulled because he was from out of state. And I don't know what he did to be pulled, but this guy pulled him and sued him. I almost fell out of the car. I almost was gone. He sued him, and Bill, the first year in dental school, had to go to court, which wasn't good. I got a job teaching in New Albany, and he won the suit because it so happened that this guy there was a car that hit us. That's what it was, and I about fell out of the car, and so we got in a lawsuit, and they found out that this guy looked for people that were out of state, and he would bash into them and cause all this problem that we had. But we did win the case, because actually he had done this before, and he had this something that he wore. They said he never wore it. It was brand new. That was our first experience. But I did teach school the whole time he was in New Albany, in Louisville. He graduated in 1960, the same year Mother finished Carolina. And there was somebody from Aiken that had an office that wanted him to go there, I believe. And then we had a friend that was a dentist in Charleston, and he called Bill and said, why didn't he come there? That a dentist was looking for somebody to go in business with him. So that's how we ended up in Charleston. It didn't work too well because his secretary was kind of having, was the doctor's a favorite friend. I'll put it that way. So she sent all the patients to him, and Bill didn't get much. And I said, we about starved to death. So he said, I am going to North Charleston. So we went to North Charleston, and he worked first in this, it was a lawyer's office. There was a little place, and there was a train track right behind it. And every time the train would go through, you hear all this noise. Oh, man. Bill had bought some stock in Eastman Kodak. And he said, I'm getting out of here. I'm going to build my own office. And so we did. It was kind of up on a hill in North Charleston. He still has it. In fact, it's being rented right now. He used that to help send our grandchildren to college. And he retired the same year I retired from teaching in '89, I believe it was. And
had I retired then?
I think it was very close to then.
We were about all retired.
I think we did all about the same time, yeah. And we came down here because that was my lot over there. We had to fill it in a little bit, and we had seen this round house, and we thought that was a good idea because we had read that if you have a hurricane, when the wind comes in from the ocean, like instead of going straight into the house, it would go around it, which it did when we had Hugo. And upstairs was not hurt at all. Downstairs was a big mess because it was basically the water that did it all. It got into the sliding doors. You could see the water up about halfway in them. And my whole downstairs was messed up. The laundry room bashed in, and I had this basket. This was funny. I had this like a basket that's made like with the fibers or whatever, and it was sitting on top of a commode. I thought, this is the craziest thing I've ever seen. And then I had this beer stein, this big thing like this, about this high. I still have it over there, and it was downstairs. And Edward found it out here on this road somewhere, and he said it's in perfect condition. It was not hurt at all. And how it got from my downstairs over here, I'll never know. But I still have it over there. It didn't get hurt at all.
I believe you bought that in...
I bought it when we were overseas.
Denmark.
Yeah, I did. Why, I don't know. I guess I like to look at it because we certainly never used it. Hazel, I was teaching school in Hemingway, and Daddy and Mother were living here, and Mother couldn't get Daddy to leave, and the water was coming up, and I think
that when Mac Oliver came over.
Mac Oliver came over and persuaded him to leave, And did they go out to Vernice's?
I believe they did.
They went out over across the road from where the school building was. They went out there a couple of times. Vernice was related to us through her daddy. And cousins, I think. He was a cousin of Daddy, first cousin of Daddy. And so they went out there and stayed that night. They went out there with Hazel too, didn't they?
I believe so.
I think so. And this was a funny thing. When they had a dog, and when they got back after Hazel, that dog was on the front porch out there in Mother's house. I couldn't believe that dog lived through that thing. It's unbelievable.
Sitting out there waiting for him.
Daddy inherited because he was an only child. I think they grew rice in that plantation, but parts of it was sold off, and I know Daddy sold some to Brook Green and probably Wakawachi. See, back there when they had property, and we had a grant, but it burned up in the Georgetown courthouse years ago, and so we could never prove it. And they won't go by your word or anything, even though taxes were paid on it for all those years. And we still pay taxes on this marshland out here. We own all this marshland here and that over there, so when we put our pier out, they couldn't tell us no because we would be going right over our property. And she could build a pier right out from here, and I don't think they can say no because, and you know that marshland, this is what's so bad about it. You pay taxes on it for all these years, but actually the state claims it. And when it's leased with the state. And we own 64 acres of marshland from here over that way. And the lines went sort of, they didn't go straight back then. They went kind of like this. The marshland, the taxes would go up every year. So this past year I went to the courthouse in Georgetown and I said, look, we're not paying that much taxes on property that we're not using and we can't use. So, you know what the funny part was? Bill Chandler had been down there that same week and told them the same thing. So they started doing our taxes. Farmland is taxed cheaper than any of them. So they said they'd put my hours in farmland. And the guy told me down there, he said, you know, there was a man that came by here just recently and said the same thing. And I was talking with Bill at our class reunion at Myrtle Beach, and I was telling him about it. And he laughed, and he said, that man was me. Daddy, and this was before our time, but I know that this is true because I heard him talking about it so much. But he had a clam bed right out there in front of our house that he grew clams, and he shipped them to
New
York, Boston, Massachusetts.
Baltimore.
Yeah, he shipped clams there, and he had a business doing that. And you know, when I was young, I didn't know anything about it, but I heard him talking about it. People up there like clam chowder, I think. He was spoiled. Mother used to tell us that Daddy smoked a pipe, but his father smoked a pipe, and Mother used to tell us that his wife lit his pipe for him. I thought, well, I know Mother's not going to light Daddy's pipe for him, that's for sure. Pretty much waiting on tables. And I did a lot of that. I did it in Garden City Grill. I did it at Charlie's place. I did it at Lee's Inlet Kitchen. I worked there with Alzada, you know. And when Alzada married, at night, sometimes I would ride a bicycle there, And Alzada and Raymond, what was her husband's name? Raymond. Raymond and Alzada and I would ride, they'd ride back with me on a bicycle. She lived to be 95, and she was born in 1906 is when she was born. And Daddy was born in 1876, so he was way back there. Mother, when she got out of high school, she started teaching in off of McDowell's Shortcut. They had a school, a little school out there, and I remember I was they had already gotten married, because I remember as a little thing, I was out there playing in the sand when Mother would be out there teaching with, and Daddy was principal of that school. And that's actually how she first met him, because it was not far from where she grew up there on McDowell's Shortcut. And her mother and father lived in a wooden cabin right down the street from where Mother grew up. And the schoolhouse was almost right across the street from that. And, you know, to start teaching right out of high school, never heard of today, but back then, she did. And that's why she had to work so hard doing classes, writing in her lessons and all this, and going to summer school to get her degree, because they did not have money for her to go to college. Daddy died in 1962, or 3. Anyway, she still taught after he died. We used to walk around here with her. We figured that would keep her going, but the last time we took her, I didn't think she'd get back home. She just got so weak because her heart was about to give way. This is Daddy. He had a horse and buggy, and he used to talk about when Happy, that's not Happy though, that's that little boy that was next door that was adopted. But when Happy was a little, his daddy died when he was 6. I mean, his mother died when he was 6, and Daddy reared him, and he had a horse and buggy, and he said when he'd go somewhere, he'd put Happy in the crocus sack and throw him in the back of that wagon, and away they'd go. Now, that's what Daddy told me. Whether that was true or not, I don't know.